Do you know your cholesterol? Do you know your numbers? Do you know the good number and the bad number? Do you talk about that? Chances are, if you've been to a doctor for any kind of blood work or physical, they're going to take your blood and test you for cholesterol. But what do those numbers really mean? And what is cholesterol, anyways? Here to unpackage this and answer some really tough questions and learn the truth about cholesterol, we welcome back to Life by Randy Dr. Elizabeth LaFay of Elite Healthcare in Sandusky, Ohio. Hi, my favorite doctor. How are you?
Hi, doing really well. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. And this is number 4 in the series of Elite Healthcare on Life by Randy. And it's going up on Elite Healthcare on Facebook and also on Life by Randy's Facebook. And the links are below as well. And I encourage you to check out Dr. LaFay in detail, her philosophies and how she is working to revolutionize healthcare, not sick care. So let's dive in. Dr. LaFay, what exactly is cholesterol?
So it is this waxy fat-like substance that is actually very beneficial for us. It is the backbone of so many cell structures. It helps make estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. It makes up 25% of our brain. It helps fight off infection. I could really go on and on. It's been sort of painted as this bad guy, but when you see it on the plaquing on the inside of vessels, which is why we talk about our cholesterol numbers, it's actually going there as a Band-Aid to help soothe inflammation. So it's almost like blaming the firemen who are coming to put out a fire.
So when you talk about inflammation, what is inflammation? Broad concept. And we know that inflammation is detrimental for these beautiful bodies we have, right? But what is it?
So very often when we're kind of slapping that term out there, it's referring to essentially oxygen-free radicals or oxidation, kind of how quickly you're rusting or aging, if you will. And really what happens in a cellular level is that your cells are supposed to be balanced. They're not supposed to carry a charge. However, if that cell becomes oxidized, it carries a positive charge. So it then wants to become rebalanced, and it turns into almost like the zombie apocalypse where it's going to go then and bump a cell that has this nice electron pairing and isn't charged, if you will, and wants to take an electron from them. So, and then that cell becomes unstable, et cetera, et cetera. So when you talk about inflammation, that's kind of the chemistry of it. However, so many things can cause it, right? Environmental toxins, consumption of trans fats, which is probably worth a whole nother show, trans fats, because they're everywhere in our food supply and they are really just not good for us, promoting a lot of this inflammation that we're talking about now. And then just environmental toxins, all the things that we've done to our planet that we're exposed to on a daily basis as far as frequencies and things in our water, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those things can promote that cellular charge and instability.
So it's at the atomic level or subatomic level that this is happening with the electrons, and we've got electrons, protons, and neutrons that make up a cell. From my high school biology class, I think that's as far as I went with it. And so these electrons are so important, right? And we are electrical beings. Is that fair to say?
Very fair to say,
Wow.
though not talked about very much. It's really kind of ironic, even coming through so many science classes throughout my career and training. We never really talked about the electricity and the electrical gradients of cells much, but that's how you transport everything in and out of the cell. Is not everything. Some of it's passive, but when you have active transport of different nutrients, waste products, minerals, etc., those require electricity or a gradient, some energy.
That's worth a whole other show as well, or a possible series.
It is. And the biggest thing that I should have mentioned first to contribute to inflammation, I think I kind of side mentioned it, is stress. When we have elevated levels of stress hormones in our body, whether it's from a childhood memory or an acute situation, our body can't differentiate that. Cortisol, adrenaline, that's cortisol and adrenaline, and it absolutely promotes inflammatory pathways.
That's powerful. And this is why I think once you mentioned that we could talk about, or possibly should talk about, stress in every episode. And we are in such a stress-filled society, pretty much almost every hour of every day, from the fast-paced nature to the threats that seem to be coming from lots of forces, from not only within a family or on the outside of the family, or certainly at a global scale, right? Just take a look at the news on an hourly basis, and your cortisol could go up, right? And so, why does stress cause so much inflammation in the body? We talk about how stress is bad for you. Stress really starts with thoughts, though, right? And so how we perceive a situation is then how we react to that situation. And it produces a cascading chemical response. Am I close?
Yes. Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
So yes, what you were saying, it's not, you could be sitting right in a library, but still feel anxious. So it is very much motivated by your thinking self, your thoughts, and also obviously situational at times. And we are very addicted to a pace in our society and judgmental if people aren't keeping up. So that's very much the structure and the culture that we have cultivated and are all seem to be living in. But if you look at your adrenal glands, which are small glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they make a lot of different hormones for you. They make a lot of stress hormones. They make sex hormones. If you are stressed continuously, you're using a cholesterol backbone. So you need cholesterol to make stress hormones preferentially. And it's at the expense then of some of your sex hormones, or the balance of your sex hormones. And specifically, I'm talking about estrogens, progesterones, and testosterones. So not only then are you kind of stealing from them, but when you are making sex hormones, they start as progesterones, have a one-way shift to turn some of those into testosterones, and then a one-way shift again to turn some of those into estrogens. And you want a balance of each of those in a specific ratio for optimal health. If you have extra cortisol, let's say, running around, it will go and upregulate those enzymes that are causing that ratio of progesterone to testosterone to estrogen, and it will change those ratios. So you become, let's say, very often women will become estrogen dominant, and that is referring to the ratio of estrogen to progesterone, let's say. In that scenario, that's when you can develop different types of diseases, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, breast cancer. That's just one small example of how it can affect your chemistry in a negative way.
And so that's the scientific explanation of how our thoughts that lead to stress, that lead to this production of cortisol by our adrenal glands, actually cause disease in our bodies, including cancer. That's powerful. So that's the sequence of events for the layman. Wow. So cholesterol then is key and crucial to keeping healthy, being healthy, and even staving off those kinds of diseases like cancer. Take us one step further, since we've established this groundwork, which is fascinating. Please take us one step further.
I guess where I would like to start is, how did cholesterol get demonized in the first place? So go back to when this conversation first started. There was a scientist named Ancel Keys. This is, I think, 1953-ish, the 50s timeframe. He did a study that was very famous at the time. If you have a nutritional science background, you're probably familiar with him. And it was called the 7 Countries Study. What he did was take data from 7 countries on how people in the study ate and came up with the conclusion that eating a high cholesterol diet caused heart disease. Unfortunately, there were 22 countries in that study, and he sort of handpicked the data that supported his original hypothesis and ignored the rest. So there was a Dr. Yudkin, I think his name was John Yudkin. Don't quote me on his name, but he was from the University of London, came along behind and essentially looked at that exact same data, but looked at it in totality, all 22 countries, looked more at the protein, the sugar, the overall data, and using that exact same data came to the conclusion that it was actually an overconsumption of sugar that drove heart disease more. Well, there was some ego bruising there, and throughout the rest of the 50s there was sort of some conversation back and forth between the ivory tower scientists at the time as to how this data should be handled. Well, then in the early 60s, Ancel Keys sat on a nutrition advisory board for the government when guidelines were being established, and so of course had the chance to then further his agenda. So that's where this introduction of cholesterol consuming cholesterol contributing to heart disease began. That's where it came from. So,
and we still have that today. That has not been overturned, if you will, right, by traditional, conventional Western medicine thought.
Correct. So how could that happen? How could that possibly be, especially if we have proof? So fast forward a little bit, in the 90s, they started to look at that a little bit harder. There was a meta-analysis with a very specific title. I think it was like Review of Clinical Trials or something that was done by our own government. And what they figured out was that lowering cholesterol had a marginal effect on lowering heart disease. However, it increased all-cause mortality. So yeah, wrap your head around that. Yeah. So, and then also in the 1990s, there was another very famous Lyon's heart disease study where they took 605 men and women who had a lot of previous risk factors for heart disease. So they were smokers, they had previous heart attacks, they all had some serious risk factors. And they had them do a Mediterranean diet, which involves eating cholesterol, versus just a prudent low cholesterol diet. And they stopped it because the subjects eating the Mediterranean diet had a lower risk of heart disease by 76%, so really profound, but they had normal cholesterol levels. They didn't lower their cholesterol levels. So, there was a lot of proof there kind of coming through the decades. However, when it came time to look at those again, a panel was formed early 2000s, and they were starting to, review, should we be lowering cholesterol? And the guidelines came out that we should lower them even more. But if you look at the contents of the members of the panel, 8 out of the 9 then worked for Big Pharma, and most of them were receiving some kind of compensation based on cholesterol lowering medicines. So this is how politics and egos, quite frankly, can start to shape medicine. And now here we are, 70 years later from the introduction of this idea. And it is so ingrained in us that we talk about our cholesterol levels practically at parties, and it's just
right.
It's a known thing, even though it's wrong.
And so let's get into specifically what's wrong with it. So we know that we've got the HDL and the LDL. So everyone knows, we've all been educated enough at this point, 2023, to know that when we get our cholesterol, there's a total number, there's an LDL, there's an HDL. Now let's unpackage that and see what the truth is around what those what those categories are and what they do?
The breakdown. Everyone has heard that the HDL is the good cholesterol and the LDL is the bad cholesterol. There's more to that story. There's good and bad within HDL. There's good and bad within LDL. So what I would say is, number one, the total overall number of your cholesterol should not matter to you. It's not indicative of heart disease. People with elevated cholesterol have clear vessels, no plaquing, and 50% of patients with heart disease have normal cholesterol levels. So there's not really a good correlation there. Having a higher HDL is the way to budge that is through exercise and movement, and that improves our overall health in general. Having a higher HDL tends to be a sort of a less inflammatory pattern within the cholesterol. So when I'm looking at cholesterol numbers in my practice, which I still do order because people want to see them, I'm never looking at the overall numbers so much as the patterns I'm seeing within there. And I'm looking for those inflammatory patterns, and there are tells usually. So you would like to see your HDL higher. Looking at the LDL as a bad guy, that's not even fair. LDL is made up of apolipoprotein A and apolipoprotein B. A is big and fluffy and cotton candy-like, and B is like small and pointy and bullet-like. So the combination of those two make up that overall LDL number. If you're consuming healthy fats, such as avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, the things that you need to make all these healthy fats in your body, your LDL will sometimes increase. So if you're eating good fat in a good amount and you go back and get your numbers, then this bad guy supposedly could be elevated, and so could your overall cholesterol number potentially go up. Is that sick? Are you sick? Are you making yourself worse? No. So that can be misleading. And then another number in there that we often see is triglyceride, or TG will be reported. And that I look at actually pretty closely as well, because when triglyceride is elevated, that's a sign that that patient is consuming a lot of sugar. And sugar, as we have mentioned, is very inflammatory. It promotes the oxidation. And so, and that's what Dr. Yudkin had discovered with that original data from the 7 countries study. So when you have an increased consumption of sugar, it increases triglycerides. And when you have that sort of small bullet-like LDL, apoprotein B elevated, when I see those two high, that's an inflammatory pattern. And that's somebody who I need to really talk to about their lifestyle. 5 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables a day lowers your heart disease risk significantly, outperforms statins leaps and bounds.
So 5 to 8, you said?
5 to 8
servings of fruits and vegetables. Okay, what's a serving?
I tend to nudge people to think about it just kind of like as a small handful. It's a general idea. There's a wonderful, which I'm sure we could include, you do such a fantastic job with these videos. There's a wonderful Mediterranean diet pyramid that we can post, and it'll give people an idea. I would say part of the Mediterranean diet is seafood, and that goes back to those healthy fats and anti-inflammatory fats as opposed to the trans fats. And seafood isn't for everyone, sometimes because of allergies, sometimes because of distaste or whatever. And so then that's when we, in my practice, I love food. I'm always going to promote and talk about food and food first, but sometimes filling in gaps with nutritional whole food supplementation makes a lot of sense. And if you're not a big seafood eater, you maybe want to be taking some really good quality omegas or vitamin E, those things matter.
And so since we've been doing these series, the Elite Top Care series, and I'm learning more about the science of why I should be doing what I'm doing. Now that always helps me, because we've heard this for so long. But for me, it makes all the difference when I know why. And so you're helping me and our whole community understand the whys behind what we should be doing for our optimal health. And in the meantime, learning more about how these beautiful vessels that are so divinely created work and how we can help have them work better for us. So it's fabulous. So I have been eating even raw cauliflower now and dipping it into hummus. So adding more of that, keeping that cut up in my refrigerator because we know the cruciferous vegetables are so amazing for the liver.
Mm.
And so speaking about the liver, what's the liver's role? I'm sure it has a role in cholesterol.
Great question. The liver is really, it makes cholesterol. It builds cholesterol. So, and it does so by an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. So that's exactly what statins do when you take them. They eliminate or really downregulate that enzyme in particular so that you have less overall cholesterol in your system, which I would argue is not necessarily a good thing. You know, as we pointed out, cholesterol is very useful for us. It's only in an environment with a lot of sugar, a lot of stress, a lot of oxidation, when cholesterol has to go put those Band-Aids on blood vessels and plaquing starts to happen. So going back to that, when you take a statin, you essentially poison that enzyme system in your liver. So let's say you're not consuming much cholesterol in your diet. The assumption on a lot of like the Framingham heart study was a big, it was like 5,000 subjects over 16 years. And it was just a really deep dive into heart disease and cholesterol consumption. And when that data was first analyzed, it was really heralded as like, oh, this is proof. We have this great massive population that was studied, and we now have proof that eating less cholesterol lowers heart disease. Well, that wasn't the case at all. It was just they were consuming a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables and all these healthy things. But even the subjects there that were having less cholesterol in their consumption, they had healthy livers, and they were able then if you lower your cholesterol by diet, your liver will just make more because it wants a certain set point. Right. My point is that when you take a statin, you're really sickening that enzyme system, and it's a big deal. Not only are you lowering your cholesterol, but that enzyme system is used for other things. So, for instance, one of the things it also makes is CoQ10. If you've heard of CoQ10, it helps your muscle contract and work and stay healthy, and your vessels stay pliable. So, in essence, you need it for a healthy heart. If you're taking something for a healthy heart, and yet at the same time, you're depleting something that you need for a healthy heart, that just doesn't make any sense. So at the very, very least, if you are taking a statin, I'm imploring you to take CoQ10 along with it.
Wow. And so here it is, that cascading effect of the detrimental effect. So with every prescription pill, there's a long list of side effects. There's a long list of adverse events, consequences, possible consequences that I think we have as a society become numb to. And then that prescription pill gives us another symptom of something else that's going wrong. And that's how we end up getting 5 and 10 different pills or more, I think, in a medicine cabinet. And so I think for me, it's so important what you do, Dr. LaFay, after having been 17 years in the ER and now working in functional medicine as a functional medicine physician, a DO in your own practice, that you're actually seeking the root causes of what is going on in a patient's body and then treating the root causes, not just treating a symptom, and specifically a symptom with a pill. And that's huge. And it's such a paradigm shift regarding the modern state of medicine today. And to me, and my logical brain, I don't know why all physicians don't do that. That just seems like the right and even humane thing to do. So thank you. And that's why you are my doctor now. So, and my husband's. And so.
Thank you. I will say, I use pharmacology. I am traditionally medically trained. I have a pretty good grasp of pharmacology. And there are times when it's necessary, or it maybe can be used as a bridge to get somebody out of a place of desperation. So, I'm well spoken in that language, but I'm always, as a physician, if that's a patient's goal coming to see me, I will work with them to get off of as much medication as possible. Here's an interesting sort of thought process to give a great example of what you just mentioned, how, there's always a cascade of effect. So let's say you go to a traditional medical doctor, your cholesterol levels are high and you're recommended a statin. You start taking a statin. That medication is not without side effects, one of which is that it can promote the development of diabetes. So let's say now that you're placed on a diabetic medication, most common starter medicine is metformin. Metformin decreases your ability to absorb vitamin B12, which can then increase a chemical called homocysteine, which promotes inflammation in your body, which can raise your blood pressure. So then that's okay, because there's, thousands of blood pressure medicines to choose from, each with their own side effects. So you can see that that's a very cause and effect example. Statins, though, I have to say, there are some physicians who think they should be in the water. And, we're really not taught to worry about the side effects. We never really, as physicians, and if patients are having them, then we're looking at, if you start having muscle aches, I think are the most common side effect that patients recognize as cause and effect of starting a statin and not being able to tolerate it. Joint aches, muscle pain, and decreased stamina or fatigue. Excuse me. Like, let's say you like to play pickleball, all of a sudden you're running out of energy faster. I think that's the most obvious side effect that patients feel. But, I had mentioned earlier, 25% of our brains are made up of cholesterol. It very much can affect your memory. It can lead to Alzheimer's disease. I already mentioned diabetes. These are some serious diseases that let's be honest, nobody wants those to happen to themselves or someone they love.
Right.
Like I said, it can deplete CoQ10, ironically increasing your incidence of heart disease. It literally accelerates the aging process in your body. By decreasing your sex hormone production overall, you can, if you're a man, a pain point is that you can start to develop some erectile dysfunction because you don't have enough testosterone in your body, or you're having trouble keeping erections. So these are some very real, impactful things that can develop in patients. And I can tell you, most physicians, unfortunately, are not relating those types of side effects or disease developments back to the fact that they prescribed a statin. And when a patient initially may have some muscle pains or something, they're coming back to their physician saying, I'm not tolerating this medicine very well. In traditional medicine, the first inclination is to then try to switch to a different type of statin that maybe that patient can tolerate better. When I would argue that if someone is willing to work to change their lifestyle, I cannot, in good faith, ever really prescribe a statin or encourage someone to take or be on one. That, unfortunately, will often be very conflicting advice for a patient. They've been seeing a cardiologist, especially if they've had a heart attack. They're put on the statin and they have a fear, obviously, of having another heart attack, and they want to listen to the specialist. I get that. It's almost more stress sometimes for me to point this out to a patient, and then they have a decision to make, sort of who to trust. So that's where I say, if you're coming to work with me, I'm working with you. I am not telling you what to do. If you're making that decision, it needs to be the right one, or it will increase your stress, which will increase your cortisol, so there's an importance there in educating yourself enough that you're making the right decision for your own body.
Or you do meet patients where they are, and the last thing you want to do is cause a patient more stress. And so if they're in a particular lane, then you meet them there, and you are not opposed to pharmacological medicines, or how is that? Did I say that right? You're the full panoply. But what you do though is you get to the root cause. That's the bottom line, is you'd want to get to the bottom lines of it. But you also have an open mind and have been able to maybe deprogram yourself or step away from the medical dogma that exists in the medical community. And for me, I think a lack of curiosity, if you will. And as a lawyer, my mind works logically, and if this, then that, kind of a cause and effect, or causing an effect. And so with these statins, if we drill down deeper as to the good cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, so we'll call it the fluffy kind and the bullet-like kind. Tell us what happens in the repair process, why cholesterol gets a bad rap, and how it actually impairs or helps what goes on in the vessel after a breach occurs. I think, and that breach occurs by something we eat we weren't supposed to, like processed sugar.
Sure. Sugar, trans fats. Trans fats could probably be a whole conversation, but these are fats that are not natural, that we've created in our food supply. So when you hear that buzz, like don't eat processed foods, that's a lot of what we're talking about is because of trans fat content and the sugar modifications like high fructose. We could go into that. That's probably a whole nother talk. But when we eat those types of things, that they are not natural, and they literally go to our vessels and kind of poke holes there and create this inflammation. They disrupt the cholesterol membrane and that fatty lipid bilayer that we need for healthy cells. And so then that causes a cascade of inflammatory reaction. You have different cell lines coming in response to that, and kind of coming in, the fire siren goes off, and here comes these cell lines that promote inflammation, because that's how our body starts to heal, that process. And then cholesterol is part of that comes in and sort of walls that off or seals it, because it's trying to keep the peace, if you will, put the fire out. So when you open a diseased vessel that has a lot of plaquing, you see the cholesterol, you see that fatty wax, like it's we've all seen pictures of plaques, and maybe not. Maybe I've been living in this medical world for so long. I think
I'll include some pictures.
Okay. And so then it would be an easy thing to kind of assume that because that's there, taking up space in the inside of that lumen or hollow space inside a vessel, and it's making that vessel narrower, that's the problem, because that is the problem. If you have thicker blood because you eat a lot of junk food, and then you don't have this nice, wide, pliable, open vessel lumen for that blood to flow through, if your blood's trying to get through to oxygenate your heart, then it's going to have a harder time. And that's when you start getting the heart pains and the coronary artery disease, heart attacks, etc. It's easy to blame the cholesterol plaquing there, but really the cholesterol was trying to help you out.
Help you.
Yeah.
So this now makes sense, something that I learned years ago from a wellness physician, a pretty famous wellness physician. And tell me if I remembered this the right way. So let's say there's a bricks and mortar. And so each cell is a brick, and then the mortar would be the cell line? And if something comes to disrupt the mortar in the brick, your body does a patch job on it. And so the cholesterol comes in, like more mortar, to do a patch job on this vessel so the vessel doesn't rupture or leak. Now, you have two different kinds of mortar. The soft, pliable mortar that will do the job and not obstruct, or the big, clumpy, cement-like thing that's going to slap on there kind of in a messy fashion, say bricks and mortar, and then stick out from the wall of the bricks. And that's the ones that cause the obstruction. How's that?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, so now how do we not have that happen, though? So statins are prescribed to get rid of the cholesterol. And it's, I think, then billed as getting rid of the big clumpy piece of mortar. How can we do that if we can on our own and get rid of that?
Great question. And that goes back to these studies that have been done following people's eating patterns. And really, it's about lifestyle, and it's about controlling it's all about the environment of your body. Cholesterol is not a bad guy. You put it in the wrong environment, it sure looks like a bad guy and can cause problems,
Okay.
So it's all about fixing that environment, controlling your stress. That's real. We live in a culture that does not promote that. Getting those fresh fruits and vegetables in, getting grounded. I could go on and on. All the positive things that we preach about all the time. This is it. And it's really not that hard. 5 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. It's not as hard as you think. And if you absolutely can't do that, then let's talk about ways to compensate for your habits, and specifically by that, I mean, maybe you need a greens powder that you can throw into some, something so that you're hiding your fruits and vegetables, or grind up cauliflower in a smoothie so that you can't taste it. It adds some substance and structure to that. One thing I want to mention about fruits and vegetables, and just this whole concept in general of heart health and vessel health, cholesterol is part of that picture. Nitric oxide is another huge part of that picture. I know in a previous video, we mentioned the capillary network and the microvascularization, 100,000 miles of it within our body. Just, it's hard to wrap your head around. And obviously
Right.
no one's going in there with the ruler, but those are single layered vessels. So they don't have the wall, and they don't have the plaquing buildup typically that the larger vessels get. They operate expanding and contracting by gas, and that gas is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is promoted by the phytonutrients in a variety of fruits and vegetables, all the colors of the rainbow. They have different components that promote different things, and most of them increase nitric oxide. It's promoted by having healthy fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin E, and it's promoted by an environment with normal cholesterol, or cortisol levels. So lack of stress. Things that then decrease your nitric oxide production are all of the opposite of those, a very oxidized environment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another part of this whole pathology that I'm just mentioning. Fruits and vegetables do so much for us.
Wow. So it's what we're really talking about. It's not complicated. It's simple, but yet many of us find it so hard to do. It seems like we're distracted, we're stressed. Maybe a lot of us are depressed, certainly anxious. And I feel bad for humanity because we're not designed optimally to live this way. So let's move more into solutions. How can we encourage all of our listeners to start walking and take baby steps into that lifestyle if this is foreign to them? They know they should be doing it, but they're going out, self-medicating with beers and wine and Xanax and I don't know, any other kind of destructive behaviors of compulsive shopping or whatever. This could be sometimes a brutal plane to live on. And how can we help encourage, Dr. LaFay, to start somewhere, right? To understand that this is the truth, and to love yourself enough to show up for this life and your loved ones in the best possible way you can.
Yeah, so well said, and it's different for every patient. I sit across from patients all the time, and I'm encouraging them and trying to guide them on how to change their lifestyles, right? A personal testimony. I was addicted to coffee during medical school. I mean, if I didn't have a coffee cup in my hand, it was part of my personality essentially all day long. And then I would go from that to like alcohol maybe at night, and I barely drank any water. And if I had walked into my own office at that point in my life and somebody had said to me, you can't have coffee anymore, or you can't drink alcohol anymore, I would have been like, you know what, we're done here. I'm gonna so it's one thing to say, do this or do that, but that's where it's where you mentioned about meeting people where they are. Whatever the goal you set, it has to be attainable. And until you kind of get moving in all the different categories, get your body moving, clean up your diet, help your sleep, which we haven't even mentioned, decrease stress, until you kind of hit all those categories, you're probably going to have a hard time getting optimal health. But the idea is to get started. Like you said, baby steps. There are some simple things. Maybe it's just maybe you're not setting down the junk food as much, but you're just starting to try to include, some fruits and vegetables every day. Maybe you're trying to get moving. And that seems like the least sort of intimidating place to start. And you just start by walking around the block after dinner every night, whatever the elements, and it doesn't have to be 20 minutes, get your heart, just start. One of the most profound, easiest, hardest things to do is to learn how to shut your mind down. It helps with every single aspect of your health. It helps you recognize that you have a higher self, that there's more to you than just this, amount of flesh that we're borrowing for now. And it just in such a large scope can improve your health. It's a simple thing. Sit still, turn your brain off. It's the hardest thing to do. And yet it's got a profound cascade of benefits.
And it takes practice. It's stillness of mind and thought, prayer. Some people call it centering prayer, contemplative prayer, whatever that is. I have Catholic friends that pray the rosary for the contemplative centering part. Whatever suits you, do that. And when you first start, your mind, maybe not praying so much like the rosary or doing something more active, but trying to shut that mind down, there's going to be thoughts winging in every 3 seconds. And you're going to have an itch over here. And then you're going to think, did I unload the dishwasher? It's amazing how, whether is it your ego mind or what, that part of your brain just doesn't want to shut up and does not want you going to a place of peace and rest. But like with anything, you start off 30 seconds at a time, and little by little, it works. And that finding that peace becomes addicting. When I was recovering, well, I shouldn't even say recovery, went from my diagnosis of a stage 4 cancer to within 5 months, moved myself through with energy medicine and the power of the thoughts. For more information, you can go to lifebyrandy.com and read more of my story if you're not familiar. But I would get up at 3:50 in the morning, which wasn't difficult to do because I had all these broken ribs and in pain. And so I wasn't exactly sleeping very well. And all my estrogen had been taken away. And so that was a whole other story. But I would start at 4 in the morning, meditating till 8 in the morning. And I would just go out there with the divine. And it was so freeing. And so in all kinds of different ways, and just to start, it sounds so, I don't know whether holy or metaphysical or how could you do that? I would go to YouTube and I type in guided meditation, heal cells, guided meditation, increase my joy. And I would just flip through them. There's so many free, there's thousands upon thousands just on a YouTube app. You don't need to download anything special. Or, if you pray to Mother Mary, there's all kinds of Mother Mary ones. There's something for everyone, or there's just frequency noises. And so to just start off slow. And so what I don't want to impart to the viewers, because I have been on this journey for very many years. And so if I tell you what my diet is and chia seeds, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I still go to McDonald's, and I don't walk, and I, drink beer every night. That's okay. We all start somewhere. And so I've got this big library of tools and a whole lifestyle, but I didn't start there. So I want everyone to be encouraged by this and to pick a few things to just start to do. And so maybe we can even do another show about that in like the top 5 things you could do, right? And in a little more detail, and provide some links to get a little template into the people's hands. So I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, or we could do we could literally talk about meditation, I think, for an hour to make it attainable, because it sounds, I actually try to use the word mindfulness, because meditation is off-putting. I used to hear
Yes,
that, think, oh, I have to sit in a corner cross-legged and say ohms, and that's weird, like it just, which
exactly.
not at all. It just takes some time. So
Yep.
yes, I think solutions don't have to be so overwhelming. Pick a one thing and get good at that one thing, and then start the next thing. That's a lot of what we do in our practice, is just kind of sitting with patients, taking some baby step goals, and then giving some support. So, yeah.
And so I'll ask the viewers, if we've inspired you, maybe you could put the comments below on what has inspired you and where you're going to start. We hope that we are also encouraging you all listening and joining in on our conversations to question what you've been told, question what you've been taught, and see what makes sense and what's best for you. Right, Dr. LaFay?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would leave it by saying it's tough to question, because if you put in an internet search for something, you're going to get sometimes conflicting results. If you talk to your doctor, they may not be thinking outside of what they're being told, essentially. So it can be tough. But if you're asking those questions and you read the right books, that can be a pretty reliable resource. So a lot of the information I'm drawing on for this conversation was originally read by me in a book by Dr. Sinatra called The Great Cholesterol Myth. And that's a title I think worth reading if you're trying to make this decision for yourself. If your cardiologist is telling you one thing and your heart is telling you another, your gut, if you will, is telling you another, then maybe take the time. I have been living in a science world for a long time, but I think it's pretty readable for the lay person. And if it pertains to you, then it could be motivating. So,
And our conversation is so timely about cholesterol and statins because in the last week, I saw 2 different headlines questioning the use of statins to lower cholesterol, and even questioning whether cholesterol needs to be lowered in the first instance. So there's something going on out there. And perhaps a Google search will pick those up as well and give kind of the other side to this very, very important story. And you get the final word, Dr. LaFay.
I would say the patient gets the final word about their own health.
Beautiful. And if you're interested, look up Elite Healthcare and the amazing Dr. Elizabeth LaFay in Sandusky, Ohio. Thank you.